Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast.
Welcome to the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. I'm Tom Ricks, and I'm going to be talking today about Afghanistan. This is a super complicated subject, and trying to talk about something like this in a half an hour is difficult. So what I'm going to focus on is where we are now, less than how we got here, right? If you want to know how we got here, there's a million books on the subject. Afghanistan, by the way, I have read several books on the subject, and at one point did a role-playing game supplement on it. So I at least know slightly more than most random people you hear talking about the subject. But here's the thing that's frustrating about Afghanistan, right? Whether or not you thought that it was a good idea to go into Afghanistan after 9/11, it is beyond doubt the longest military conflict we have ever had in this country, right? We've been there for literally 20 freaking years. It's longer than Vietnam. It's longer than Afghanistan. I mean, it's longer than Iraq. It's longer than the little known conflict we had in the Philippines at the turn of the 20th century. It is longer than the campaign against the Native Americans by the cavalry, except for maybe the hunt for Geronimo. I'd have to look that one up. But in terms of like an ongoing armed conflict, it's definitely the longest. And whether or not you agreed, whether or not we should have been there in the first place, or whether or not you agree with the drone strikes, or whether or not you agree with propping up probably one of the most inept, corrupt, and stupid governments in the history of mankind, i.e., not a huge fan of the Afghanistan government here. The fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter how we got here. Where we are is a complete clusterfuck, right? Because Joe Biden, the president that was elected by the centrist wing of the Democratic Party, because a lot of people were looking for anything that would save us for Trump, and they voted out of fear, right? Basically, let's be honest, Biden became the candidate he did, beating the other people in the primary because of fear. And people were afraid of Trump and afraid of what he would do. And so they saw Biden as the safest consensus candidate to bring the party together and to go back to the way things were under Obama. And look, I like Biden. Don't get me wrong. You'll hear me insult Biden a lot in this podcast. I like Biden as a person. And I think Biden has a lot of things going for him. He's certainly better than Trump. And he's certainly better than a lot of the other people that I didn't like in the primary. He wasn't my candidate in the primary. That was Warren. But in the end of the day, he's certainly better than I voted for the man because it was a choice between the end of civilization and Biden. So I chose Biden instead of the end of civilization. But Biden has been asleep at the switch for a lot of things. Chief among them, and you've heard me talk about this in the podcast, his failure to pay adequate attention to voting rights. And, if you think things are bad in Afghanistan, wait until you see the Republicans turn America into Afghanistan and the Republic of Gilead. And that can and will happen here if Biden doesn't get off his butt and stop playing around about infrastructure, which is important. Don't get me wrong. You need to, fix your bridges, and you need to fix your roads, and you need to fix your train stations and all that other stuff. Yeah, that's government 101. And it shouldn't be like your number one agenda item, because as much as government 101 is physical infrastructure, power 101 is understanding that if you don't do what it takes to stay in power, you are toast, right? Before I go even more into Saigon to Electric Boogaloo, right, I want to take a moment back to, we've been watching the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, and they're great. And one of the episodes we watched recently was about another disaster in the making that anybody who was paying attention could see coming, which was the Lenin Revolution in 1917, or the fall of the Kerensky government, who basically, how do I put this? When you get put in power because people are angry at the czar for putting your hand into the garbage disposal that was World War One, and there's a massive revolution to remove him, I don't care how much that sweet, sweet money from America and France and Britain is to keep your shady, shaky government afloat. I don't care how appealing that money is. If the people who helped you get into power are angry because you're still throwing Russian soldiers into the meat grinder, you're kind of, stupid if you stay in the war, right? It was in America's interest to stay in the war, and we did a lot of shady, stupid things to help the white Russians against the red Russians in the Soviet/Russian Civil War. But you know what? At the end of the day, we lost. And so did the Kerensky government, and the Kerensky government fell. And the reason it fell is because they didn't pay attention to the handwriting on the wall. And the fact of the matter is, the Taliban are monsters. Everybody knows this. The Taliban are going to do horrible, horrible things. Everybody knows this. But the thing is that when you have a dam, and somehow, for reasons that I still don't understand, 2,500 soldiers of American specialty are magically keeping this duct tape garbage country of garbage government of Afghanistan together. And for 20 years, we've allowed a significant chunk of women to grow up under not dictatorship circumstances. Then, you know what? It does cost us some money. And it was definitely something we probably never should have done in the first place. But you know what? It's working. And I don't always agree with Hillary Clinton, but Hillary Clinton flat out said that when we get out of there, if we pull those troops out, it's going to be a disaster. And you know what? I might not always agree with Hillary Clinton, but she does have a habit of being right. And let's be clear. Lots of people warned us about Donald Trump. I was one of them. But Hillary Clinton, like myself, was awfully specific about the kinds of things that Trump was going to do when he took power. And she was right time and time and time again. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because, again, I don't always agree with Hillary Clinton, but you should at least pay attention to when an ally on the side of non-lying reality speaks. And Biden supposedly respects Hillary Clinton, and yet he completely ignored her in this, right? And the reason I'm bringing this up, the reason I'm bringing Hillary up, is because the people that are responsible for the clusterfuck that is Saigon 2 Electric Boogaloo are basically the centrist wing of the Democratic Party, right? When I look on Twitter and I see a conversation that is a bunch of psychopath reactionary Republicans saying, yeah, Biden's bad, boo, boo, understanding that all Biden basically did was not stop the incredibly awful Trump plan to pull our troops out. That's literally all he did. He didn't put any thought into it. He didn't have an exit plan. He did nothing. He's been sitting on his butt. I know this because I wrote a letter to the White House about this 3 months ago. He's been sitting on his butt about tens of thousands of special visa applications for translators and teachers and people that have helped our troops for the last 20 years in Afghanistan, who are literally going to be killed because Trump doesn't like Muslims, and these people were Muslims, and they were trying to get into our country, and Trump wasn't about to approve their special visa. And Biden, who cares most of all about infrastructure and living up to the legacy of his dead son, is sleeping on the job as far as voting rights, sleeping on the job as far as holding Trump accountable, and sleeping on the job as far as Afghanistan is concerned. Let's be clear. Based on the articles I've read, Biden has not been a fan of Afghanistan since back in the Obama administration, right? He didn't like the surge. He thought the surge was a mistake. He thought that we were wasting time and treasure and American money and blood in keeping this war ongoing. And to be honest, I can understand that. There are a lot of my allies on the progressive wing, on the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, that believe we should have gotten out the instant Biden became president. There are some people that think that the instant Biden became president, he should have had an executive order and gotten everybody out that day. Well, even if you believe that, right? The fact of the matter is, even if you are willing to sacrifice the women of Afghanistan, and this is millions and millions and millions of them that are going to be living in a situation that makes the Republic of Gilead look tame by comparison. Even if you're willing to just write them off for a couple of dozen American troops that get killed each year, and these are lives, right? You're literally playing math with lives, right? How many American lives are you willing to sacrifice for Afghanistani women? And when you're president of the United States, this gross, disgusting math is something you have to do every single day. And I don't envy any president except Trump, because who cares about him in any way, shape, or form? I don't envy any American president having to go through this. But the fact of the matter is, if you want the job, there are lots of gross decisions you have to make. But you know what? Just because you have to make gross decisions doesn't mean you get to be an idiot about killing everybody, right? In other words, if you're gonna stay in Afghanistan, then stay in Afghanistan. Leave the magic 2,500 troops somehow keeping this crap government together. Leave it alone. If you're going to do that, fine. If you're going to pull us out, fine. Pull us out in an organized and carefully orchestrated way, and make sure that you get the people that helped us out, right? But instead, Biden has chosen to do neither well, and he literally pulled our troops out so fast that the local Afghani army, our supposed allies, literally didn't know about it until 12 hours later. Like, we just literally picked up stakes and just got the hell out with no consideration to our embassy and no consideration to our people. And so now, literally today, Joe Biden is sending back in 3,000 troops to help evacuate the embassy. So I want to, because the math for this really matters, folks. So I want you to understand. We pulled out 2,500 troops 6 weeks ago, and now we're sending 3,000 back in to fix the situation that we messed up. There is no circumstance, none, where Biden can be excused for this. If you are trying to excuse Biden, then you're going to do one of two things. Either you're dishonest with yourself and your values. You're not honest with yourself. If you're trying to defend Biden in any way, shape, or form on this, you're not an honest person, and you just need to admit that, and that you just need to admit that you're Team Democrat, and you don't care, you don't actually have any values. Or you're just looking for any excuse to attack Biden in the first place, which means that you're Team Trump, or you're Team Green, which is an anti-vaxxer and just, is a never, believed Tara Reid and all that crap, right? You're not on Team Reality either. And that's fine. If you're not on Team Reality, I don't even know why you're this far into the podcast, right? But if you're on Team Reality, if you actually believe in reality, and you think reality matters, and you think what Biden is doing is okay, then I got a bridge I want to sell you. Because seriously, this is a complete screw up, right? There was no provision to get our embassy out. There was no provision to help Afghanistan plan this. We literally pulled our troops out without informing them. And okay, yes, the Taliban have advanced much farther than our military experts thought they would. But how could we not expect that, right? That's like saying Lenin advanced much farther on Moscow when the Kerensky government fell apart than we thought they would. I mean, seriously. If, look, I make mistakes. I've made a couple of big ones in the last couple of days. But here's the thing, right? I'm not president of the United States. I didn't sign up for the job of the most powerful man in the world. And if you're going to sign up for that kind of powerful job, you need to surround yourself with people who will tell you that the emperor has no clothes. Because the reason I brought up Hillary Clinton is not necessarily because I'm a big Hillary Clinton fan, right? But if you think that she was right, and Biden in the Democratic Party conference made a big deal about how right Hillary Clinton was about Trump, right? He himself used those words, not me, right? And if you're going to say that she's super smart and was right about Trump, why are you going to ignore her about something like this, right? And so my point isn't so much that Hillary was right, and my point isn't so much that we should have stayed in Afghanistan. My point is that Biden has surrounded himself with centrist DLC management consultants that have disconnected him from reality. And the thing you need to understand is that if he is going to drop the ball on something like Afghanistan, then he is definitely going to drop the ball on something like voting rights, because he's all about the infrastructure. That's all he is. And until he gets his infrastructure, he's not going to lift a finger about Trump. He's not going to lift a finger about voting rights. Yeah, he put Kamala Harris in charge of it, but he also put her in charge of a million other things like the border and other things, and hasn't really empowered her to do anything about this. The reason I know Biden's not taking voting rights seriously is because he hasn't even met with the Texas state representatives that fled, or senators that, or representatives that fled Texas to deny the House a quorum to buy time for Texas. And they have been there a month, and Biden still hasn't met with them. He's not coordinating strategy. He's not pushing Manchin or Sinema or the Senate to take up voting rights or get rid of the filibuster. He is asleep at the switch. And now he's going to be too distracted to deal with it because he's trying to save American lives in Afghanistan and trying to keep his entire presidency from going down as the next Ford administration. So take it to the bank that unless you see a real come to Jesus moment, a real self-awakening, voting rights are not a priority. And if he doesn't fix voting rights, then in 2022, any Democrat running in any state run by Republicans will not win. And you can say goodbye to the House, possibly goodbye to the Senate. And if that's the case, then 2024, a Republican can and will be elected. This has been the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. Buy my book, Have Name Will Travel, at Amazon and other markets. RedAnvilCreative.com contains all our podcasts. Copyright 2021.
To fight the forces of evil!